Backstage at these little beer bars and clubs became one of my favorite places on earth to be. It was a clubhouse. It was a treehouse. It was always some little back room with a couple of filthy couches and cigarette burns in the rug and graffitis on the walls. And that was your place. That's where you hung around, and that's where you held court. I was part of what you were working for. The greatest backstage of all was at the Whiskey A Go-Go. By the time Van Halen started playing there, which was right around 1975, they had not yet erased all the graffiti that covered every inch of the ceiling in the famous main dressing room upstairs. You had poems by Jim Morrison written on the ceiling, complete paragraphs, Morrison's signatures, and the signature of everybody in the Doors. The signatures of everybody from Led Zeppelin to Johnny Winter to ZZ Top, Alice Cooper, Jethro Tull, and the Mahavishnu Orchestra. Jeff Beck, Santana, Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, and on and on. They covered every square inch. You could spend, and I did, many, many hours just checking out each little quote. It wasn't until probably the early 80s when they painted it over and commenced the tradition anew. But by then the whiskey had changed. This is one of the first landing spots on the West Coast for any band. And when we in VH first started playing there, that was the first testimonial that we had arrived. We were going to write on the walls, right next to the guy in Led Zeppelin, and somewhere in between him and Aretha Franklin. What made Van Halen's backyard parties different from anybody else's backyard parties was that we really perceived them as little concerts, and we advertised them as little concerts. We put out flyers. We started to take the profits and whatever it was that we could barely make and use it to rent a little stage and get a little better PA system. There was this store in Monterey Park, Alhambra area, which is south of Pasadena, called Johnny Roberts Music. Johnny Roberts Music was the coolest place that you could ever go to rent or buy your equipment. They had little pictures of everybody who'd been through town from the late 60s to the early 70s. A picture of Jimmy Page buying a guitar, or maybe Tina Turner buying a microphone. Nah, you wouldn't have seen that. Ike was in charge of the equipment. Coming up with a better and better PA system was an important issue because we were pulling more and more people. So you needed more and more volume just to get the music across. Bought some big Altec Lansing speakers. It's a big horn, a 15-inch speaker, and it put out a great sound. And we started dressing up a little bit. What was popular then were the bell-bottoms. The bondage element was just kicking in, and there was this one little store in Hollywood that custom-made all of this leather gear. I don't think any of us really were aware of what exactly bondage was. We just knew that the leather belts looked cool. You get a black leather belt with some studs on it and a big silver belt buckle, and that was your prize of the 3-month period, whatever it took you to afford the thing. You had to wear it low, gunslinger style. There weren't many places that you could buy black leather pants. It was still a left-of-center statement. You had to go to some underground place who would custom make them for you. I had a pair of black leather pants with drawstrings in the front and the back made super low cut. You could never sit down in them, you'd pop right out. They would dye my legs purple black. They were unlined, just raw leather. Some little guy with a Marlon Brando motorcycle hat and a handcuff belt made these for me. He had some little slave working for him behind the counter with his little dog collar and everything. The guy that did all the sewing and shit. These damn pants stained my legs every time I'd go to sing, because I'd sweat in them, and I couldn't get the dye off. I went to more than one doctor, because at first I was terrified. I thought, wow, I'm going to have some kind of toxic chemical reaction to something in the leather. Now I'm permanently tattooed. If I stopped wearing the pants, then all the dye would come off in the hotel room sheets in 4 days' time. It would be okay for me to drop trow in front of you with the lights on 4 days later. Till then, we didn't turn on the lights. I looked like the Toxic Avenger, about to put the triple whammy on you. I was black, except for where my little underwear was, from my legs up to above my belly, and all you'd see was my little wiener glowing in the dark because of the contrast. Look at the first Van Halen album on the back cover. I'm wearing those damn pants. Every morning on tour, I'd have to bundle up the sheets, put them in the corner of the bathroom so housekeeping wouldn't see the dye had come off. The sheets looked like the Shroud of Turin. Anyway, Edward and I picked up the gauntlet first, and we eventually became as much fun to look at as to listen to. We started to improve on the production. We painted a sign on a bed sheet, and this had never been done before. The bass player at the time, Mike Stone, knew the way to make a grid work on the sheet so the lettering would be right. and then we taped it off with adhesive tape and spray painted it. It was the first of many signs to be hung behind the band. Whoa, this was amazing. This wasn't a sign, this was a backdrop. The banners that we hung behind the stage merely showed the name of the band, Van Halen, but it was an effort at production. And production was always a part of Van Halen, and it would look like it sounded. Alex would spruce up his drum stage, figure out things to hang in front of it so it wasn't just milk cartons. And we went on to build backdrops made of plywood and pieces of mirror and such that we found. A very important part of the Van Halen show were smoke pots, which were completely illegal. And I certainly don't recommend fooling with them. You get a little empty tin, say like cat food tins, and you bolt them to a little piece of 2x4. You run a plug, a double-headed plug, up the middle of it, and you run an electric wire over to a little switch system. Next, you go down to the local gun store and buy a can of 4F black gunpowder. This is for people who load their own bullets. They would only sell you 2 cans of 4F per person, especially if you're a 19-year-old long hair. So we'd each take turns and go down and buy our allotment of 4F powder until we had 8 cans. Put a little gunpowder in the tins, and then when you go to hit the foot switch, it sparks off and you get a great big colorful boom, a smoke bomb. We would set them up on top of the PA and on the sides of the drums and behind the amplifiers. I would scream, "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the amazing Van Halen!" And we'd hit the first note and fire off half the smoke pots. It looked like Tiananmen Square. People would be running, gasping, crying from all the smoke. If it was an indoor dance and we'd miscalculated the ventilation, it was like playing in a cloud. You couldn't see 3 feet in front of you. All of which was immensely cool. It was all too much. It was all over the top. And then, of course, at the end, you'd fire off the rest of the smoke pots to signify the big finish. Just setting up and loading the smoke pots took hours. And we'd get burned. You'd have a few beers, you're dancing around, you say, "Hey, thank you, have a good night," and somebody'd fire off the smoke pots. You'd be leaning a little too far to the left and blow off half your haircut, take off an eyebrow, lose a sleeve, what the hell. Regularly, something on stage would catch fire and have to be put out. We became known for it. That with Van Halen, you got a full blast show, a real show. This, of course, all carried into bigger and bigger elements. Once we started to play on the road, we took all of this stuff with us. It was all fiercely illegal. Otherwise, you need a fireman and a court-appointed expert in pyrotechnics. But in the 70s, things were looser. People weren't screwed down quite as tight. Vietnam had just ended. Nobody even thought of all these party favors as addictive. You didn't have AIDS. You didn't have moms against drunk drivers with AIDS. You didn't have Ethiopians with AIDS, whatever. There was sort of this big, long halftime going on. Pretty soon, the smoke pots alone took up half the car. They were all run by the bass player, who also ran the lights. He had a lot of foot switches, that boy, and backup vocals. Sometimes, of course, just like the space shuttle, you go for the lights and hit the smoke bomb. Somebody would lose a sideburn and their sense of humor, but only briefly. I think you can hear elements of our most classic smoke pot caper on a bootleg tape of Van Halen's last real show before we went on to make a record and go on the road in 1977 at the Pasadena Civic. We saved all the smoke pots for the grand finale, hit the last song, and fired off all 25 at once in a 4,500 person exhibition hall with the windows closed, and it just smoked the place out. It looked like Tet Offensive from what I read. I was afraid to move because I thought it would fall off the stage. I couldn't see 2 feet in front of me, and the smoke was so acrid and thick. And it, of course, set off all the smoke and fire sensors in the building. And fire departments from 7 cities showed up. It was like right out of the movies. All the doorways flew open all at once, and all you can see with these rolling red lights on top of the fire trucks, and all these guys with gas masks and hoses and full blast fire boots and gears from the movie Brazil, bursting through the door to throw 4,500 of our closest friends out of the building. "Hey, I'm with the band, man." And so is she, and her too. One of the vice presidents from Warner Brothers had heard of the band, came down to see the show, sat behind the amplifiers and watched. When those firemen showed up, I knew we had it in the bag. But I'm starting getting ahead of the story. There were beer bars. We started to play the beer bars. Some of the tops were Barnacle Bill's, which is over near Arcadia. It's more inland than Pasadena. Pasadena is one full side of a cassette tape from the beach. Those of us who live in an automobile, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Just put your cassette in, and when the side's over, you're there. Barnacle Bill's was 1/2 of 1/2 tape, a quarter side, going more inland. It held maybe 150 people, just a little stage. You could reach up and touch the ceiling from the stage. No dressing room. It was $1.50 for a pitcher of beer, and there'd be a dance contest. We would play at Walter Mitty's Rock and Grill, which is in Pomona, out in the middle of nowhere, right across from this huge naval chemical processing installation. Walter Mitty's had been obviously a shop or a store that they turned into a beer place. And on one side was a Foursquare Gospel Baptist meeting hall, and the other side was a porno shop, and we would play 45-minute sets there. The jukebox had 2 songs on it, one which I don't recollect, and the other I'll never forget. It was Jim Dandy to the Rescue by Black Oak, Arkansas. Whenever they would play it, you would hear glass breaking. People would wahoo and their pitchers hit the floor. We would play everything from old Rod Stewart to Ohio Players. It was the first time I saw somebody get killed on the dance floor. Bikers frequented the place, and it was during our 5th set. Towards the end of the night, and there was a sprawling fracas in the corner. I remember seeing somebody reeling towards the drums. He was holding his stomach, and I thought he was spilling soda pop out of a cup. He flattened out on the floor, and they turned the lights on. Somebody had knifed him in a brawl. 2 opposing bike gangs. We didn't play anymore that night. But the next night, it was all the fear and rumor of, wow, the such and such guys are coming back to exact revenge and, to look for payback. But we went on to play. We simply pulled the amplifiers a few more feet away from the wall than usual in case we had to jump behind the amps if there was a shootout.